The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the program. Let's get right into it. Very quick update on yesterday's negotiations with the Westboro Baptist Church to stay away from the funerals of the children killed in the Sandy Hook school shooting. After the show, we went back and forth with one of their associates. They had a number of different demands, which we were not willing or able to meet. Eventually, it turned out that a lot of the funerals happened yesterday. We received emails from people saying, listen, if they show up, we're going to have basically a wall of people around them. They're going to spend all this money to get 20 other people over there. At this point, it's not worth giving them anything. Do not negotiate with terrorists. So in the end, the decision has been made. We are not going to give them any airtime. That is it. We're not even having them on today to explain it. They're just not on. That's it.
Right. So I think everything worked out pretty well.
I think it did. All right, let's get into fiscal cliff discussions. The lot going on with the fiscal cliff, of course. January 1st, some automatic spending cuts and rollbacks of tax decreases set to take place. We had the way this reporting has evolved has been fascinating. First, we heard that John Boehner was, quote, caving on millionaire tax increases. Now, of course, they're not really tax increases. They're just returns to the previous rates before the Bush tax cuts. And of course, also, he's not really caving in the sense that if he does nothing, if he doesn't agree to anything, those rates are going to go up anyway, aren't they, Lewis? Because they're just going to be automatically rolled back on January 1st.
Presumably, yeah.
Yeah. So Speaker John Boehner making a big deal, and right-wingers making a big deal that he was caving in some way. But wait a second. So what you're saying is, I'll give up something I'm going to lose on anyway, if only you'll give me something much bigger that's got nothing to do with it. Sounds about right. What a good negotiation.
That's usually how these negotiations go.
And it's interesting because if you look at this week's edition of The Economist, which is not a liberal publication by any means. In fact, it's very, very conservative fiscally. The figures are there in black and white, right? Revenue has to be raised to pay for spending. Right now, federal spending is about 25% of GDP. Taxes are bringing in 16% of that. We can only assume, even in the most optimistic of cases, that we can bridge that halfway, right? Let's make up, of that 9 points, let's make up 4.5 of it on spending cuts and 4.5 of it on revenue increases. And that seems pretty reasonable to me. And what's fascinating is that even The Economist, which again, as I said, is not a left-wing magazine by any means, puts most of the blame for the current situation on George W. Bush, President number 43, who of course is basically ignored by the right in discussions about why we're even in this financial situation. But as we know, conservatives who are for small government, well, right, turns out George W. Bush blew up the entire federal financial system.
And I mean, I understand that it's important to look at history and understand why we got into this mess, but at the same time, it doesn't help us fix the problem.
Right. No
pointing
question about it.
Pointing the finger doesn't fix the problem, but yeah.
We have to, well, I think it's important, Natan, to point fingers in one sense. If you're going to decide who to listen to for solutions, you need to know if those are the same people that created the problem with the same, quote, solutions in the past.
That's true, but, I really think that conservatives and the Republicans in this case have won this debate in the sense that they've made the country think that what we need to do right now for the economy is to tamp down on the deficit, which is not really backed up by what a lot of economists say. So
right.
in a sense, they've sort of won the argument, even though Obama might win the political so-called battle.
Well, let's move on to that, which is now President Obama has made a third fiscal cliff offer. Okay, now this matches the amount of spending cuts with revenue raisers. It calls for 2 stimulus measures, and it looks to avoid the debt limit fight for the next 2 years. Now, the White House moved back from the initial set of demands and the second set of revenue demands of $1.6 trillion and $1.4 trillion. Now we're looking at raising $1.2 trillion in revenue. The president is also not insisting that the taxes increase on families with incomes above $250,000. He is saying, let's permanently extend the Bush tax cuts for everybody below $400,000. So that difference there, $250,000 to $400,000, is not insignificant. Remember, the top 1% cutoff happened somewhere around $330,000, $340,000 of income per year. So what do you think of this, guys? I mean, do you think that this is the president caving? Do you take a broader approach, which is that no matter what the numbers are here, we've got a broken system that these types of back and forth arguments every couple of years just aren't going to fix anyway? What's your thought?
It seems to be a broken system, but at the same time, when we're talking about incomes of less than $400,000, I mean, when you go over that, even 500,000, even 1 million, let's say it was over 1 million. I mean, that's really where the majority of the money that we're going to need to make this up is going to come from.
Well, there's two sides to that, and we don't have the aggregate numbers, but there's two ways to think about it. In other words, you could make the argument, as I think about it to myself here, if you say, well, okay, the taxes on incomes between 250 and 1 million, it's way less, right? What you collect, the marginal tax rate collection on one person who makes, say, 500,000, if you were to raise the limit to 1 million, is not that much. Versus if you have somebody who makes 100 million and you raise that rate, whoa, it's a huge amount. The problem is there's exponentially more people who are in the income range between that 250 and million.
That's
so
true.
in the aggregate, I think it's still very significant.
It's pretty significant, but there are people who are making, lots of people making between 2 to 50 million a year.
Sure.
That's pretty substantial. And like we talked about before, there are certainly plenty of people who could have large families living in big inner cities who don't have lots of extra money to spend, even though they're making 200,000 a year combined income, 300,000 a year combined. So it's, I don't know. It's
So
tricky,
are
I guess.
you? So what do you think about the raise to 400?
I'm okay with it.
Natan?
If that's what it takes to get this done, I'm okay with it.
I actually agree with you. Yeah,
Yeah.
Natan?
Well, I'm okay with it only in the sense that it gives Obama a political victory because he was able to raise tax rates on the wealthiest people, and that's fine. Whether it's over 250,000 or 400,000 or 1 million doesn't really matter for the political victory. But in terms of what the country needs, I mean, what the country needs is to have unemployment down to 3%, or at least 5% or 6%, and it's around 8%. So basically what's going on here is they're not tackling the real issue that's going on with the economy. They're just kind of creating a political distraction so people think that what we need to do is reduce the deficit.
I agree. There's definitely a big distraction happening here. Let me touch on something else. Remember when news broke out that Republican South Carolina Senator Jim DeMint was leaving his position in the Senate basically to become a lobbyist, okay? He said, you know what? I think I've had enough of this. I'm going to run the Conservative Heritage Foundation. Well, in South Carolina, the governor gets to appoint a replacement. In this particular case, that governor is Republican Nikki Haley. In this particular case, that replacement is Tim Scott. Now, who is Tim Scott? Tim Scott has served one term in the House of Representatives. He defeated the son of Strom Thurmond to win his spot in the House of Representatives, and he's gone on to earn praise from Sarah Palin, a bunch of prominent national conservatives, and Mike Huckabee. Mike Huckabee, who explained that God didn't stop the Newton shooter because schools took God out of the classroom. So what's unique about Scott, of course, is that he is one of the few African-American Republicans to hold elected office. We're used to this. We know that it exists, but it is rare.
Right. Alan West.
Exactly, and he is gone, fortunately.
Yeah, but this has more meaning. I mean, this is the first the first black senator from South Carolina since the 19th century.
That's right.
So that is a pretty significant thing right off the bat.
There are.
Well,
and
I don't want to call it significant because he didn't win that seat. He's being appointed.
well, that's true, too. Nobody elected him to that seat.
Well, that's
But
the only way that he could get there.
Okay, so he's one of two. He was one of two Black House members in the 112th Congress beginning in January. He will serve as Republicans, rather. He will serve as one of as the only African American in the Senate starting in January. Now, here's the thing. We have to say that the Republican Party, we know about the diversity problems, right? Now, here's the issue. The party does do a pretty good job of elevating the few minorities that do find themselves in its tent, right? So we had Alan West. He became the hero of the Republican Party. All of a sudden, people talking about him as potential president or vice president. There's no question the Republican Party does move the few minorities that are on their side up.
Rubio, Jindal.
The problem is, these individuals are not going to solve the minority problem faced by the Republicans, right? Which is minority voters just aren't interested in right-wing policy. In fact, Tim Scott is a huge representation of the problem, maybe even more so than any of those others. I mean, let's listen to some of the policies, right? Tim Scott proposed a bill to kick families off of food stamps if one of their members, one family member, went on strike as part of a union. Can you imagine anything more counterproductive for lower income individuals and certainly many minorities? You can't think of anything more damaging to them. And this is what he proposed.
Yeah, completely insane.
He called for the impeachment of President Obama over the debt ceiling. It's an almost completely meaningless proposal. It's just partisan nonsense. So Tim Scott is a very, very good example of how African Americans can thrive in the Republican Party. They have to be able to happily go in, prepared to just take in those standard Republican policies that hurt people in the minority groups they themselves are a part of. Right, Natan? That's the way to do well as a minority in the Republican Party.
Right. I mean, as far as the Republicans go, as long as they think that they have an image problem and not a policy problem, they're going to keep decreasing in popularity nationally, even if in these deep South states they remain popular.
No question. Interesting report. We always like to talk about how certain groups react to certain events. And one example is how the NRA, Fox News, and the right wing react to mass shootings. Now, we saw almost total silence from the NRA just after the Sandy Hook school shooting. And there's a great report in New York Magazine by Gabriel Sherman, which says that producers on Fox News were told, stay away from talk of gun control policy during what was essentially non-stop weekend coverage about the shooting on every cable network.
No surprise, really.
Fox News staying away from it. This was, yeah, I mean, not surprising at all. I skipped around a lot over the weekend to see how this was being covered. Immediately noticed that Fox was basically staying away from discussions of gun control. They had no shortage of people talking about God's role in stopping the shooter or not stopping the shooter, but no real discussions about gun control. Now, let's be honest. If Fox News did have discussions of gun control, they would have been incredibly skewed and pro-gun. Maybe they had the sense to realize that the right-wing rhetoric wasn't going to play that well in the heat of this tragedy.
Not going to play well in the mainstream in general, but I mean, still, amongst their viewers, you would assume that it would be safe for them to talk about gun control, right?
Maybe, but I think they know that they would be lampooned significantly.
Yeah.
There's an email from David Clark, executive producer in charge of weekend coverage, which is cited in this piece in New York Magazine, which says, this network is not going there. We haven't buried the children yet. We're not discussing it. And then another source said we were expressly forbidden from discussing gun control. And it wasn't universal. On Fox News Sunday, there was some discussion of it, although that program seems to be an outlier in terms of Fox News broadly.
Yeah.
So there you go. Terrible tragedy. Now, what's fascinating is that terrible tragedy, as admitted by Rupert Murdoch, the head of News Corporation, which owns Fox News, but Rupert Murdoch himself tweeted out, quote, terrible news today. When will politicians find courage to ban automatic weapons, as in Australia, after a similar tragedy? So even he was involved there, but still no coverage on Fox News.
Not yet. I wonder what the narrative will be as soon as this is all settled down a bit.
Quick thing I want to touch on as well. If the Sandy Hook shooter had an Arab name and was Muslim, what would the media coverage be like? What would the reaction be like? I believe that people would broadly be way more inclined to talk about revamping public policy around gun violence and gun control if this had been one of those instances that the right wing could point to as, see, it's those Muslim terrorists that are attacking us. Because I mentioned this yesterday, 9/11. 9/11 is a perfect example. In the same way that guns don't kill people, people kill people, and I said this yesterday, planes don't kill people. People hijacking planes and using them as weapons kills people. Incredibly rare. Very rare that a plane is hijacked when you think about the number of people on flights. Incredibly rare. Yet right away, the entire government policy shifted to make it really difficult, even for people with no negative intentions, to get on a plane. The guy wasn't Muslim, so the right needs to channel their energy into other battles. Apparently, I don't know, the war on Christmas. Gun slaughter seems to be a low priority. What do you think about this, Natan?
I think that the focus here should still be, no matter what. Yeah, it is true. The narrative would be totally different if it were a Muslim or really any religious person with a political or religious motive. But I think that the focus here needs to be on whatever is causing this is kind of irrelevant to the gun control issue. No matter what is causing this, if you don't have access to guns, you either can't go on these rampages, or if you do go on them, you minimize the killing by not having access to these guns.
I agree. Yeah. gun control overall would be the main issue. Unfortunately, if the shooter were Muslim, I think we'd probably see some type of retaliatory attack on a mosque or Muslim family or area. I don't know.
And even the gun control specifics would probably be geared towards Muslims and guns.
It would be so much more chaotic.
Yeah. All right, we have the last membership special of the year happening right now. 1-year membership and a David Pakman Show hoodie of your choice. It's a great package deal. Go to davidpakman.com/holidays, and you'll also get the bonus show, hosted and produced by producer Lewis. It's great to have the bonus show because the show is great, but the bonus show is just as good and it's more of it. So why wouldn't anyone want that?
And it's uncensored.
And it is uncensored. All right, davidpakman.com/holidays. We'll take a break. Plenty more after. Stay tuned.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Welcome back to the David Pakman Show. Make sure as you do all of your holiday shopping, if you use Amazon.com, first go to our website, davidpakman.com, and click on the black banner on the right side of the page that links you to Amazon. If you click that first and then do your shopping, 7% of your purchase goes to us instead of to Amazon. It's a big, big deal. A lot of people using that this month. Thousands of items already purchased through that link, Lewis. Incredible.
Most excellent.
And, of course, you can become a David Pakman Show member and support us directly, made possible in part by liberalbias.com. Lewis, do you know why patriots eat turkey on Thanksgiving?
Does it have something to do with liberal bias?
It does. It's because turkeys are evil, socialist, liberal birds that need to be eliminated. You can find out more about that at liberalbias.com.
Interesting.
Today's new member of the day is James Williams. It's great to have James Williams aboard as a David Pakman Show member. And you, too, can be thanked live on the show. Just go to davidpakman.com/membership. I have to go back. I know I'm a day late on this, but I have to go back to fiction for my book recommendations, which are made possible in part by A Fashion of Bastards by Joanna Louise Johnson. Find it on Amazon.com. This book is instantly a top fiction book on my shelf, Lewis, and I would encourage you to read it. The book is The Forever War by Joe Haldeman. Now, Joe Haldeman is a Vietnam veteran who wrote this book, and even though this book is more or less a science fiction book, and it's a war that spans, it really spans over 1,000 years, in particular because of time dilation and traveling through space and a bunch of other stuff, but it really is representative of the Vietnam War in the sense that the people involved don't really know how it started. It's not clear if it started over a mistake. It's not clear when it's going to end. It's not even clear how victory would be defined. And also it really represents, because in the book, when a lot of people have served, for example, a year in the Forever War, they come back to Earth and it's actually 200 years later because of time dilation through space travel. They don't even recognize where they're coming home to and they don't fit in. Again, they're not able to work. Another very linear parallel to the Vietnam War. I highly recommend this book, but I do want to give a disclaimer. There are probably 4 or 5 sections of the book that are pretty graphic and violent descriptions of combat. So if that's something you're not interested in or would really bother you, I do issue that disclaimer. Maybe not the book for you.
Thank you, David.
But
it does sound good.
I highly recommend this book. Very, very good. And I can't believe it's taken me this long to read it. It's been around, it was written before I was born, that's for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get into some interesting stories here. There's a program in the IRS which received a bunch of fanfare in 2009 and 2010, which was a program that claimed to target high net wealth individuals, right? Global high wealth people, and audit them. Now, of 290,000 millionaires, in the last 2 years, only 36 have actually been audited as part of this program. Now, this is incredible. Of those 36, 24 owed an extra combined $47 million in taxes. Now, let's talk about these numbers rationally. Some people emailed me saying, listen, if you extrapolate that out, that means that these millionaires over the last 2 years have underpaid their taxes by $380 billion. We have to think a little more rationally about that, though. We have to assume that the IRS is doing two things. Number one, yes, they are using a formula to target those millionaires that they believe fit the bill for an audit, that are more suspicious tax returns for whatever reasons, whether it be high deductions or small business or business owners, whatever the case may be. That's true. But at the same time, they do also say, if you actually look up the program website, that they do random audits in order to confirm whether there is a discrepancy between that, whether their screening method is effective. So I don't believe that we could extrapolate this in a linear way. I don't think 380 billion underpayment in 2 years is what we have here. But this sample definitely tells us that we have a lot of revenue that the government is missing, not because taxes haven't been raised, but simply because people aren't actually paying the taxes that they should be paying based on the current tax rates.
Right. And obviously the ideal thing is to be auditing the people who should be spending, would be spending the most on taxes. And we've talked about before about entitlement fraud being a huge problem.
Right.
Of course, how are you going to go after all of those people? I mean, we're talking about smaller amounts of money all over the country, lots more people.
Right. The cost to go after it and then the money recovered is nothing compared to what we're seeing here with this 24 out of 36 data point.
Right. So should the feds be going after auditing millionaires more aggressively?
It seems that according to the program they claim to be putting in place, they said they were going to do that.
Yeah.
And 36 out of 290,000 does not sound too aggressive to me.
Not at all.
Particularly when 24 of them are giving you another 47 million in revenue.
Right.
That's incredible.
You think that's got to easily make up the cost of paying people to do this?
Oh yeah, I no question.
No
about
question there. I mean, come on, this is what needs to be done.
We talked last week about Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia's controversial statements about if you can't make a moral statement about moral judgment on homosexuality, how can you about murder? Well, a lot of information has been dug up recently about Justice Antonin Scalia's son, who it turns out was a chaplain at one of these Catholic anti-gay, ex-gay ministries where you can fix gay people to not be gay anymore. This is unbelievable. It turns out, this is an op-ed in the LA Times written by Michael McGow, that Scalia's son was involved in... I just can't even believe that this is even really happening when we talk about Scalia's points of view. He was involved in, his son Paul, Roman Catholic priest, served as a chaplain for the Arlington, Virginia chapter of Courage, which is an official Catholic apostolate that ministers to people with so-called same-sex attractions. This is research from David Pakman Show former guest and member John Becker, who did the investigation at the Marcus Bachman anti-gay clinic. And he actually writes that he does a bunch of great information, research about this, but it's just unbelievable that Scalia's kid is involved in this. And then Justice Antonin Scalia has written, we must always distinguish the person from the attractions. Most errors in this area come from the reduction of the person to the attractions. To say a person who has homosexual attractions must be homosexual, which of course he doesn't believe in. It's amazing. 1 of 9 justices who is going to be hearing landmark cases on marriage equality but has alluded to believing that it's really just attractions. It's almost like it's a choice to be gay, and his son is involved in one of these ex-gay ministries. Unbelievable.
And yeah, are we going to believe that his son came to these conclusions on his own, that there was no influence from his father whatsoever? Obviously, we have a major conflict of interest here. This is someone who should recuse himself.
Absolutely.
And is he going to? No, because he's, here you go, Eggman, he's a clown.
Right. Yeah. No question about it. Natan, you want to chime in on this? I know you have a lot of thoughts on Scalia.
Yeah, I just think that in 30 to 40 years, we're going to look at this, at these kinds of views on gay rights and gay people, the way we now view 1950s views on integration and interracial marriage.
Yeah, just the anti-gay nuts now don't agree with that. They say it's totally different because you choose to be gay, you don't choose to be black. So it's hard to have that conversation with them.
Indeed.
A scoutmaster from the Boy Scouts, unbelievable, but perfectly believable. A scoutmaster is facing child porn charges after hundreds of photos were found on his computer. This is a New York Boy Scout leader named Edward Orenchuk III of Garden City, New York. He was arrested when authorities found hundreds of images of pornography on his computer involving kids as young as 5 years old. He was charged with 3 counts of promoting a sexual performance by a child as a sexually motivated felony and 3 counts of possessing a sexual performance by a child. They observed him making multiple images of child porn available for download online over the last few months. They tracked the images to his home, and that's basically that. He was an Eagle Scout who served as an assistant scoutmaster with Troop 243 in Garden City. He was employed as a page at the Garden City Public Library. I'm not surprised.
I'm not surprised at all. If you talk about the Boy Scouts with me, if you talk about the Catholic Church, all that comes to mind is pedophilia, and that this is where people go. They know they have access to children. This is where they go to do this. And
right. And again, to be clear, Louis, you're not saying most people in the Boy Scouts or Catholic Church are pedophiles. You're simply saying that both of those places are attractive places for pedophiles to go.
Basically, yes.
And of course, the Boy Scouts are very anti-gay. Gay people are really the problem.
So is the Catholic Church.
The child porn guy, that's not as big of a concern. It's the gay people. That's really where the problem is.
Oh, yeah, right.
Let's take a break. Please go to davidpakman.com/holidays. It's the last membership and apparel special of the year. The last one, that's it. Then 2012 is done. davidpakman.com/holidays. We'll take a break. A retired lieutenant general from the Army is going to be on with me next. You're not going to want to miss that interview.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Joining me is retired Lieutenant General Robert Gard. He's currently the chairman of the Center for Arms Control and Non-Proliferation. He served as executive assistant to 2 secretaries of defense, as well as combat operations in Vietnam and Korea. I read your recent CNN editorial, Get Real and Cut Pentagon Spending, and this was fascinating because this is a topic we discuss on my program all the time. And you talk about, aside from the necessity discussion about Pentagon defense and military spending, you say there's actually a whole other issue, which is simply that it is political spending driven by political interests. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, the Secretary of Defense just sent a 4-page single-spaced memorandum to the chair of the House Armed Services Committee objecting to the fact that in the defense authorization bills is some $8 billion of expenses that Congress added for projects in their district and states that the administration does not want, that it wants to save certain programs that are low priority and spend the money on higher priority. So what that tells you is that the members of our legislative body are still using the defense budget as a jobs program.
Right, and we've also heard, particularly, I guess I would identify it on both sides if I saw it, but the 2 or 3 individual instances I can think of have been Republicans indicating that forget about reductions in the defense and Pentagon budget. Anything short of steady increases is essentially a reduction because we must constantly increase that spending in order to stay safe. What do you make of this safety argument? Analyze that for us.
Well, you shouldn't spend any more on defense than you need for your national security. Now, when we were in a spending mode from 1998 clear up through fiscal 12, every year we increased the base defense budget. As Mike Mullen, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, said, we've had straight years of increases, nearly doubling the base defense budget, and we simply have lost our way in being able to prioritize. And there's no reason to just keep spending more on defense for its own sake. you look at what you need for your security. We're spending more now than we spent at the height of the Cold War when we had an existential enemy in the form of the former Soviet Union. And there's hardly any indication on the horizon that we're likely to engage in a major war in the near term.
Well, I want to follow up on that because you mentioned in your piece, you say, and I'll quote you, our nuclear weapons policy is based on Cold War conditions that no longer exist. The Pentagon is expected to spend more than $700 billion on nuclear weapons over the next 10 years for little additional security. Let's put aside for a second whether or not we're likely to use the nuclear weapons we already have. What is the justification for continuing to add to that arsenal? Couldn't we destroy this planet 100 times over at this point?
We have way more nuclear weapons than we conceivably need. The number is based on previous presidential guidance. In the last administration, the nuclear posture review assumed that we had to have the capability to initiate preemptive nuclear war against 5 countries. And of course, the head of the Strategic Command has to take that guidance into account as he makes his recommendations on the number of weapons that are needed to be able to carry out the mission that he's given. Now, we have a new nuclear posture review, and the administration hopefully now has finished the implementing instructions that certainly will change that guidance and will reduce the need for the number of nuclear weapons that we have now.
Can you address a little bit this idea that the number of bases we have across the world is somehow absolutely necessary for the safety of this country? I mean, we've outlined all the numbers. We've looked at specific countries, for example, Germany, over 50 Army bases. Forget about all other branches of the military. As a retired lieutenant general, what's your sense? I mean, could we cut down to 25 Army bases in Germany and be just as safe, or is that just am I just missing something there?
No, I think we probably could. That number of bases goes back to the time that we built up during the Korean War our forces not only to fight that Korean War, but also in Germany, because there was a fear that the attack in Korea was a diversionary strategy and that the Soviet Union may have had in mind coming through the Fulda Gap. And as General Alfred Grunther put it, all they needed to reach the channel, the English Channel, was shoes, because we had just a very small number of troops in Germany at that time, and they were in a constabulary configuration. So
this is incredible to me because you just outlined a very specific people on the ground reason for why those bases are there. And now, many years later, we hear all sorts of equivocations and essentially what are rewritings of history as to why we need those bases there now, even though these aren't part of our modern strategy, right? I mean, as you outlined, those were there for very specific reasons years ago.
Yes, and it's logistically difficult to kind of rearrange things in a country where you have a number of bases. But I don't disagree with you that we can certainly cut the number. The current program calls for bringing back 2 of the 4 ground brigades that we have in Europe. We, of course, have other forces there, particularly air forces, and even some tactical nuclear weapons that, from my standpoint, are no longer required.
Now, the last thing I want to touch on here in the minute or so we have left is whenever we have conversations like this, there's a backlash, which is, hold on a second, if you do really reduce Pentagon spending and shut down military bases, so on and so forth, putting aside the security argument, you're putting a lot of people and families out of jobs, and that's simply not good. How do you react to that? What's the counter argument to that?
Well, all the studies that have been done on the kinds of expenditures that maximize the number of job increases puts puts defense spending near the bottom. Near the top are programs such as education and medical support, which create more jobs than are created by military expenditures. So it's a completely specious argument. The problem is that in your own particular district or state, having a reduction may in fact decrease in the short term the number of jobs, and therefore you have members of our legislature who are very reluctant to see what otherwise would be very sensible reductions in the states or districts under their jurisdiction.
I'll say, we certainly see that reluctance. We've been speaking with retired Lieutenant General Robert Gard, chairman of the Center for Arms Control and Non-Proliferation. We're going to put up a link to your CNN editorial so people can read it in its entirety. Thanks so much for being here with us today.
It was a pleasure to participate.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome back to the David Pakman Show. I want to follow up on a story from a week or two ago. We talked about Michael Dunn, who decided to shoot and kill 17-year-old African-American teenager Jordan Davis because he felt that the loud music coming from the vehicle in which Davis was represented a threat to him. We heard rumblings of what might be eventually a stand-your-ground defense. At least in the short term, we have some news to report for you. A grand jury has indicted Michael Dunn on first-degree murder. Certainly different than the George Zimmerman situation, at least thus far. We will see what the outcome is here, but hopefully some sense of logic and reason will take place here.
Yes, as I recall, there were no guns in the teen's car.
Nope.
So, yeah, pretty cut and dry.
And also Dunn fired 8 or 9 shots into the vehicle.
Right.
Grand jurors also added 3 counts of attempted murder for the others in the vehicle. So far, so good.
Oh, yeah.
Congressman Ed Markey from Massachusetts, is saying that substantial amounts of oil may still be leaking at Deepwater Horizon. This is incredible. He said, "My concern is that substantial amounts of oil could still be leaking from the wreckage. Back in 2010, I said that BP was either lying or incompetent. Turns out they were doing both. This is the same crime scene." He's commenting on reports that fresh oil slicks are again showing up in the Gulf of Mexico in recent months. This is just incredible that we're still dealing with this at this point. Markey led Congress in the investigation on Deepwater Horizon, which killed 11 people, and of course initiated what was really one of the worst environmental disasters in history. He also was a key participant in pressuring former CEO of BP, Tony Hayward, to resign, and he also championed that record-setting settlement, which the U.S. extracted from the company. Here's a little bit of BP's latest commercial saying all is well and good in the Gulf of Mexico. Take a look.
This was the Gulf's best tourism season in years.
All because so many people wanted to visit us in Louisiana.
They came to see us in Florida.
Nice try. They came to hang out with us in Alabama.
Once folks heard Mississippi had the welcome sign out, they couldn't wait to get here.
This year was great, but next year is going to be even better. And
Right.
anyone
Okay. So, well, it turns out that still some oil slicks there. Unbelievable. Just incredible that this just cannot get under control after years.
Yes, we're also still hearing that there is a lot of, I don't know what you'd call it, residuals on the bottom of the
Right.
Gulf.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, no surprise really. BP is still trying to cover it up and probably not doing much to help heal the Gulf.
McDonald's wants to keep its stores open on Christmas Day with no overtime pay for employees. Now, as you know, I believe that Christmas, being a federal holiday, is an establishment of religion by the government and actually should not be a federal holiday. However, it is, and it seems to me that if you force people to work, you pay them overtime. Now, what does McDonald's say? McDonald's is saying, we're not forcing people to work. We are giving them the opportunity to work. They are signing up voluntarily, so there is not going to be regular overtime pay for this. Now, to me, this is a very weak justification. If a store must be open on a holiday, in other words, McDonald's corporate has sent out an email and an internal memo to stores saying, listen, we make a pretty good amount of money. The few stores that opened last Christmas or on Christmas made a good amount of money. So I think we're going to open all stores this Christmas. If the stores have to be open, employees are going to feel some level of pressure to sign up to work. They are working on what, for a lot of people, is the country's treasured holiday. They deserve overtime pay. McDonald's, I don't believe, should be treating their workforce this way. I'm certainly not loving it, to say the least.
No, but we are boycotting McDonald's. We have been for like a few decades, right?
Well, that's the thing. I was going to say, I'm now going to add McDonald's to Walmart and Papa John's and some others onto my do not shop list. But then I said, wait a second, it's been like 14 years since I've been to a McDonald's, maybe even longer at this point.
Yeah. But, of course, they treat their employees like crap. It's McDonald's. I mean, who's shocked here?
Yeah. Well, no, I'm not shocked in any way. But again, this is it's just not surprising. But you would think at some point, I don't want to say that. I was going to say you would think at some point the employees would get together and go against what are these just consistently anti-labor policies. But at the same time, a lot of the people who work at McDonald's certainly work there because they need that job and probably don't want to make waves. And you know what? I understand that. I understand not wanting to jeopardize the job you have, particularly when you don't know, well, what other job could I get? What other job is available and or am I qualified for?
Yeah, you may have no choice but to just bite the bullet.
Certainly can't blame the employees. Let's go to some of your voicemails. Our voicemail line is 219-2-DAVID-P. Call 24 hours a day. Leave a voicemail. Here is a voicemail about angry voicemails. Let's listen.
Hey, what's up, David and Lewis? This is Rob from Cabo again. Man, I was just watching one of your shows with the angry voicemail, and that was hilarious. You know, I've heard a few of those. Not quite as angry as this guy, but you know what? I'll make you a deal. And you know, last couple of points I've made, you guys have disagreed with, which is funny. I love the show and I love watching you guys, and I usually agree with everything. But last couple of things I brought up, like Ron Paul and the gay thing. But anyway, okay. I'll make you a deal. If you guys play more of those angry caller voicemails, hopefully you get a lot of them because those are great. Those are absolutely entertaining. I will sign up for your membership, and I'll even purchase one that's not the bottom tier. So those are great. Keep those.
Okay, I mean, we play the ones we get. Here's the thing. If the voicemails are so heinous and threatening that it constitutes really a threat, those go straight to the FBI. If they're just funny, angry voicemails or weird criticisms or whatever, you know, it's clearly just not a big deal. We play those. It's just we don't get that many that fall exactly into that category.
And some of them require a little too much censorship.
That's true, yeah. If we have to spend 20 minutes editing the thing and bleeping it, it's a little bit...
but yeah, we love them too.
All right, and here is another voicemail. Let's take a listen.
Hey, David Pakman. This is Prophet for God One. You'll find me on YouTube.
Okay.
I just need to ask you a couple of questions, and I want to pinpoint the Supreme Court in the gay rights law,
right? Which
I know is wrong. But I wanted to give you a couple pointers of what would happen if the gay rights is passed, and I want you to be able to give your views on this too as well.
Okay.
Because I was telling everybody that this may affect churches. In the United States, all churches, if this gay law is passed. The point is I'm trying to bring is if this gay law is passed, now a gay person can sue a pastor for not marrying them, or they'll file a discrimination charge against pastors. So I think this gay law is kind of dangerous for churches churches in the United States.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that would be great. I think if people have legal recourse against the discrimination of tax-exempt organizations that presumably are there for good, I think that is fantastic. I don't see that as a problem. I'll tell you, I see that as a positive thing. The last 2012 membership and gear special of the year is happening right now. You've got to go to davidpakman.com/holidays to sign up. Blowing up yesterday, Lewis.
Excellent.
Shipping those hoodies out. Check it out, davidpakman.com/holidays. Back here tomorrow, brand new show. Tune in.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.